People who grew up in a different socioeconomic class as your significant others. What are the notable differences you've noticed and how does it affect your relationship, if at all? Finally, a question relevant to my life. I grew up rich. Not private school rich, but once a month, my mom would casually have between $200-$500 she would decide to delegate to us going on shopping sprees and crap. I never had to worry about anything. My parents didn't live a lavish lifestyle and saved, but we did just as well as my friend's family even though we didn't flaunt it like them. Her dad was a banker and they had like 8 horses in a barn outside with a built-in pool and hot tub and a whole outdoor grill and a mansion. My boyfriend grew up in the ghetto down south. He used to have to constantly pawn his TVs and amps and mom's jewelry to keep paying the bills, learned to fix cars so they wouldn't be stranded when the car broke down, and lived among what is apparently an insane roach infestation most of their lives. So he and I now have something we call going to the pool. It's when both of us have the same memory, but through different socioeconomic eyes. This is also relevant when it comes to how we handle money and react to things. We realized this after both of us were sitting around remembering how much we loved going to the pool, and then had a good laugh about how different the circumstances of the event was. When he was a kid, going to the pool was a huge deal. He would save up to pay for him and his sisters. He walked them and had to watch them the entire time. To him, the pool was a rare thing and a responsibility, but it provided his sisters with a rare luxury, and it was always worth it to him. He loved the pool and considered doing it to be quite special. They didn't do it every day. When I talk about going to the pool, I remember my community's pool having water slides, and always grabbing change for snacks. I remember riding my bike there and it always being fresh and clean. I had a season pass and my mom would always give me cash for whatever I wanted when I went. I pretty much went every single day of the summer unless it was closed. Both of our experiences had joy in them, and neither of our experiences invalidate each other, but we both relate to the memory of going to the pool in a completely different way. That's sort of how we treat everything. In many ways, I think it helps us a lot. We respect how the other grew up, and both of us have gained from seeing things from the other side. It's never caused problems for us, but it does sometimes instigate some really interesting discussion, and helps us understand each other a little bit better. I have a buddy from Vietnam who learned to swim by watching over the fence at the pool, and then once a week he would try out the moves he saw when his mom would give him money to go to the pool. My boyfriend grew up under Jehovah's Witness parents that forbade him from experiencing holidays. It's been incredible watching him get to experience his first Christmas morning, carving pumpkins for Halloween, and all of the other shenanigans that the holidays bring now that he no longer lives with them or follows their beliefs. I've never seen a 22-year-old squeal in delight at presents under the Christmas tree before. He constantly has a big smile on his face every time we look at holiday decorations and when he tells me about all of the gift ideas he has this year. It's amazing watching somebody experience something for the first time when it seemed like everyday life to me as a kid. My perspective is weird. When I was a kid, my family went through bankruptcy due to medical debt after my siblings all died. We were homeless for a bit. Middle school was rough while my parents struggled to pull things together and my mom gave birth to my little sister. When I graduated high school, my parents were doing well enough to pay for my private university education in cash, and my little sister's private high school was more expensive. I've lived at both extremes of income, but not in the middle. My husband grew up with a dad in the military and a mom who was a teacher. They were pretty solidly middle class. It's odd the different things that trip us up. I find that when I really want something I have to stop and take a breath and calm down when I realize that we can afford it. When I was a kid, I owned 2 pairs of pants that I wore to school and washed by hand every other night. As an adult, I tend to find excuses to wear dress pants or nice shirts. I also keep $20 and a large candy bar in my purse at almost all times. I just like the security of knowing that there's something there if I need it. I'm never going to be hungry because I can't afford to eat or trapped because I can't afford a bus. I think my husband has a much healthier relationship with money than I do. He's calmer about saving and uses it like a tool. I think he doesn't always understand some of my hangups about it though. I find myself asking permission for things we can obviously afford. I'll admit it's difficult to understand when he meets my parents now and they're heading off on their 4th or 5th overseas honeymoon, or when my mom spent almost as much as my husband's parents make in a year on our wedding because she didn't like my idea of a small reception at the house or in the park. That's not how I grew up, but it's all my husband sees when he interacts with my family. It's a lot of culture shock for both of us. After my siblings all died. Oh dear. I'm sure this will get buried, but I wanted to share. Apart from the stark skin tone differences between myself and my GF, she is black, I'm white. We both grew up in drastically different households. I grew up with a father who made over 300k plus a year, yearly vacations, etc. My mother homeschooled me because she felt like public education wasn't up to par, and I went to a community college rather than high school because my parents could afford it. When I got to college, my dad dropped 120k a year on my education and my twin sisters. She goes to Stanford. I go to Amherst. My girlfriend on the other hand lived a really poor life. She grew up on food stamps and cans. And even today, small things like having a roll of sushi at a supermarket is a total luxury. She does some things that until I read this post I didn't fully appreciate, like spreading mayo on pasta, because it's what her family could afford a sauce. When she was 16, she moved out from her abusive household and worked 30+ hours a week while being an honors student and getting a full ride to Amherst College. The major differences are many. She is really particular about spending money, and she always gets delighted when we can spend money. She works way harder than anyone ever should. 14-hour days every day with no weekends is her norm, even more when she is hustling. She has no concept of what it means to rely on your parents and does everything for herself. Success is the reason she lives and pushes her entire drive. She doesn't know how to connect with other people in business because her whole life she hasn't had anyone who ever helped her or offered her a hand. In stark contrast, I don't know how to appreciate money. I actually stole money from my parents when I didn't have a job, money I have since repaid after realizing what a douche I was. I had parents who adored me and pushed me. I had a car that I crashed because I was an idiot and didn't know what it meant to value a gift. I was super lazy because everything came easy to her. I always ask for help because I assume that others will help me. Since I met her, I can say that we have both changed. Because of her I now run my own startup and work non-stop. I have been homeless living on couches for 2 years now as I struggle, and I have only just started to see success. If it weren't for her, I would have given up, never took the risk. I know how lucky I am. Seriously, Anna, if you are reading this, you are my angel. I adore you. Me, upper middle class. Her hillbilly farm town. She had a lot of stuff I never saw, like live animals, not zoo. She had a pet fox, and all these cool homemade items. I introduced her to big city life and I took her to Broadway. She took me to her county fair. It's nice. It's nice people can appreciate both sides of the country versus city like that. I grew up on food stamps and the free lunch program. My boyfriend's parents are quite literally part of the 1%. There are moments. Gifts from his parents are always well thought out, high quality essentials. While my family does what they can. I got to stay home while they took him to Hawaii a few years ago equals. It's embarrassing at family dinners sometimes when his mom makes amazing roasted vegetables and I prefer the canned version because it's the only veggies I ever ate as a kid. He got to play instruments in school. I really wanted to be in band, but we couldn't afford a trumpet. There are a lot of little things, too. I had to do a lot of rapid learning once I got to college because good spending habits, organization, productivity, etc. don't just appear out of nowhere. Tidbit I just thought of, there are also a handful of hobbies activities that only happen with money. Scuba, equestrianism, skiing, climbing, spelunking, water sports, even cycling. Hard to have experience with those as a kid unless your family has the money for it, and I personally do not deal well with the envy of opportunities I never had. My mother was murdered when I was a year old. My father and stepmother were given custody of me. They are hardcore bikers. I grew up learning how to sell drugs, fight, work on bikes, make moonshine, etc. My parents beat me, neglected me, pimped me out. My so comes from upper middle class, went to private school, family celebrates birthdays, having a fridge half filled of food is getting low, etc. We learn from each other. She now knows how to field dress a deer and change her oil on her car. I know how to balance a checkbook and manage my college debt. We never worry about money because I can make a 20 feed us 4 weeks and she knows when to remind me to spend money on myself. Really, we just teach each other and love each other for our differences. I'm in a really weird situation with my one. We didn't really grow up in different backgrounds, but when I grew up, me and my brother never wanted for anything. We got nice things, but my parents were not rich, they just made money and we just lived our life how we wanted to. My parents were never in debt but never had huge savings either, etc. Now my partner never wanted for anything either, but her parents were more savvy with their money and didn't just do everything they wanted to and saved for a rainy day. They've now got a lot of money and getting old with nothing to spend it on. Although they do spoil my kids all the time. This has caused awkward moments in mine and my partner's life, though, as sometimes I want to live our lives and spoil ourselves without putting us in debt, whereas my partner wants to save for the rainy days and we don't really do anything with what we've got. The other side actually involves our parents now, in that has spoiled my kids and mine can't spoil them as much, but still do. TLDR, there was no huge divide but slightly different ideas on upbringing that resonates through the generations. Mine are the save for the rainy day parents. Can't complain. We turned 17 together a week ago, 2 days apart. I was ecstatic that I had my first 5 driving lessons paid for me as my present from my parents. 2 days later and she wakes up to a £5,000 car on the drive. Meanwhile, in the same week I'm lending my mum £200 until payday so we have enough money for shopping and don't have to borrow off my grandparents for the 5th week running. She's eternally grateful for everything she gets and not spoilt at all. But she grew up as the only child in a well-off family. Had holidays to Hong Kong and India. I grew up with 2 brothers and had holidays in a caravan in Great Yarmouth. It's the little things too. They won't think twice about going out for a meal in the middle of the week just for the heck of it and paying a bill in excess of £100. We only go out on birthdays and have to be wary of how much we spend. I don't judge her at all and her family are hardworking and lovely. It's just hard not to be a little bit jealous sometimes. I'm the one from the poorer background and I never feel secure when it comes to money. Holidays and new clothes etc are hard for me to buy without feeling intensely guilty even if I have the money. For me there's just anxiety around everything. Spending too much on food especially, leading to just skipping meals or eating cheap crap 20p instant noodles a la. Boyf never gets this. Yep, exactly, like I'm okay with bread and peanut butter, but he's not game lol. My parents were. My mom had servants in her house and my dad lived in a poor family. Both my mom and dad were the youngest of 6 children. My mom was spoiled as a kid. My dad had to do all the dirty work, cooking and cleaning for the house. What I see now is my mom makes my sisters and I do a lot of housework all the time, and usually my dad willingly joins us and loves working around the house. They are usually good about showing us that everything in life is earned, not given, but in their own ways. My dad talks about his life growing up and my mom talks about her dad and how he made all his money from nothing. I had to teach him how to do his own laundry. I've been taking care of myself and my laundry since I was 8. He's better now. Sounds like everyone I went to college with. I grew up in what I thought was a well-off, right-wing family. We had a nice house, nice cars, nice holidays etc. My wife grew up in a poor left-wing family. They lived in a modest house, was a state-owned house until the 80s sell-off, saved money where they could, cut corners and got by. It's only as I've become an adult husband father myself that I've realized that my family weren't well off, just more accustomed to debt. My family still lives in a nice house and drives nice cars, but they're also under a mountain of debt. If my wife and I have some financial struggle, we can't even ask my family for help, because they're stuff rich and cash broke. My frugal, corner cutting, bread and fish fingers eating father-in-law however has a substantial saving account from which he always happy to help out his kids and grandkids. Each summer he gives us £500 towards a holiday we could otherwise not afford, at Christmas another £500, and if we're ever in trouble he'll go out of his way to help us out with what we need and more to keep us and our kids happy, not just to get by. But he actually wants us happy. We needed to borrow £50 for a few weeks. He sent us £200 and rejected our attempts to repay it. My wealthy on the outside parents however, if we're in desperate need of £20, will lend it to us and require it paid back as soon as physically possible. Have made us pay to replace items lost or damaged years ago. Got to love replacing a 10-year-old sat-nav unit with a brand new version and generally see us less as close-knit members of a family unit, and more as debtors creditors, a business partnership. It's a realization that has hugely changed my personal views and my political stance. I want to grow up to be like my father-in-law. I want to save and I want to be able to help my kids out. I want my family home to be something I pass on to my kids. He's not given us the house, but given us a 0% interest personal mortgage saving 20 years of interest payments, which covers his rent in sunny Spain. Not something I sell to buy somewhere more impressive to my friends, only to have it gobbled up and reclaimed by the bank when I die. I want to be a good man who does the right thing by his family, keeps them happy, make their lives easier and better. Not a flashy man who looks well off to all except his bank manager. This difference between my ex and I wasn't very big. I'm pretty solidly middle class while he was pretty solidly upper middle class. Even with that, though, there were some pretty stark differences. Going to his house for dinner was the biggest treat. Fresh vegetables and organic meat for dinner every night. Soups, desserts. My family usually had frozen pizza, mac and cheese, cereal, sandwiches, canned vegetables. Fruits were usually apples, oranges, bananas. If he wanted specific food for snacks lunches, he got it. My dad refused to take me grocery shopping because I would ask for too much. He got a car and gas paid for. I got neither. He didn't have to work for extra cash. I did. His family traveled internationally every couple of years, paid for a really expensive violin, paid for a school trip internationally, In fact, my first time on an airplane is when his parents took us abroad and paid nearly all my expenses. It's just a different mindset. 2. Like I said, my family is middle class but both my parents grew up poor. When we went on a trip to Florida one year, we could have probably afforded to take a plane but instead we drove 16 hours. My dad only ever buys used cars, usually at auctions. I had never tried any ethnic food besides Mexican before I dated him. I thought $100 was expensive for a bike. My boyfriend's parents bought him a $500 bike in high school. To be fair, my dad later did as well when I went to college. I used the not having car thing as a persuasive tactic. His parents were mad when he considered going to our state school. My parents were mad when I considered applying out of state. I had to convince my dad to let me go to the state school instead of a community college. I'm upper middle class and black. The biggest thing I realize around black friends who are not raised in the same economic class as me is that they don't feel entitled to the world. I've always felt like I could do anything I wanted, question anyone, get in the face of authority, demand to know why, go after exactly what I want without feeling like I should, etc. I am extremely resourceful and actively seek knowledge. I noticed many of them just accept their lot in life and stay there. From HS on I noticed this. They are conditioned to think they are less than. I see it in their actions and how they address problems. To challenge the status quo is unthinkable. I have a freedom of mind that they never got growing up. When I started to realize this I got depressed about it and isolated even more, but now I am more understanding and try and gently help where I can and try not to seem like a snob about it, which is really easy to do. Another thing that was strange for me with dating chicks that were lower economically growing up is they aren't used to making meals on real plates with real silverware. It's paper plates and crap. It just seemed really out of place at first. All the time I've spent on Reddit, you've summed up perfectly what it's like to be poor. Privileged people will never understand. They just assume we're dumb or lazy. My so come from slightly different classes. but I've never felt like there was a large economic gap. I'm a farm girl. He's a bit of a city boy. We were both raised to not spend money extravagantly or on things we don't need. That being said, the biggest shock I had visiting his family was that everyone owns a tuxedo. By times visiting his family we were going to a wedding. After 6, all the men wear a tux. Never in my life had I been to a wedding where the guests wear tuxedos. It happened so often I kind of thought they just put on a tux every Saturday night. My family was very poor growing up. Pennies for gas, free lunch and food stamps. We often ate at other people's houses, and now as an adult I wonder if that wasn't because things were really hard for us. My husband grew up in a well-to-do family. His father worked for the government, so he has always been taken care of. He's not a snob by any means, and I'm not constantly reminding him how poor I was while growing up. But yesterday our differences really hit home for me. I started a new job after relocating for my husband to go to school. The job is great, and it's a salaried position with healthcare. Unfortunately, moving from our hometown to this town has created a lot of expenses and we have to catch up. We're paying half our rent on the 4th because I just don't make enough to cover it. He's a full-time engineering student, so he doesn't work. Yesterday he told me that he was so stressed with our finances that he wanted to take out a student loan because he felt so bad paying our rent late, and he was frustrated because I didn't seem to care. I told him I wasn't worried about it because late fees don't incur until the 5th and we have food and power, and I've been through much worse. He admitted his parents had always bailed him out if things got this tough. I let him know that to me, financial issues don't get solved overnight, and taking out a loan to fix a temporary problem would only make it worse in the long run. He agreed, so no loan. It's just hard to have relative experiences when you grow up differently. That being said, I'm really glad we did, so we would have a different set of eyes to see things, if that makes sense. I've been able to enjoy the grander things in life, such as sampling casks of 12-year, matured Capri Sun, distilled in the rich, history-laden aisles of Walmart, but I think it's best illustrated by the number of towels I own. Whereas the common person employs the use of 1 or 2 in their morning routine, I have 6. They make my life immeasurably richer, and I love them as I would my own offspring. 1. Angelica, dark brown. She's a rather big bath towel. I use her to dry my chest, back and arms immediately after stepping out of the shower. 2. Meredith, light blue. She's been with me the longest. I bought her over 6 years ago from John Lewis, but the old girl doesn't look a day over 2. I use Meredith to towel dry my hair. 3. Julie, white. She's another bath towel, but of a smaller size. I normally scrunch up the middle of the towel into a ball shape and then use her to pat dry my face. 4. Rupert, white. I appropriated him from the Waldorf Astoria in New York, and he's served me well. Rupert is used to dry my ass and legs. 5. Emily, white. She's a small hand towel that I use exclusively to dry my penis. Although she's the smallest, she's also the most luxurious. I'm talking hand-woven Egyptian cotton with a thread count of 180. Mother. 6. Bertha, dark brown. She's the biggest of the family, a huge beach towel that I bought from Amazon. I use Bertha as a cape to cocoon my naked body into when I'm walking from the bathroom to the bedroom to get changed. When she's draped around me, I feel so warm and loved. You may think that it's, quite frankly, utterly ridiculous to have one towel to service each body area, but each towel has their own set of characteristics that makes them so ideal for their job. Do you want to use the short, stubby fibers of a beach towel to dry your face or penis? Heck number. That's why Bertha has such absorbent fibers, while Emily's are as soft as the fur of the humble chinchilla. After use, each towel goes back onto the heated towel rail, and that's where they remain, nestled snugly, until they are used again the next morning. This sounds like a monologue from Patrick Bateman. My family is upper middle class, and most of my friends and past girlfriends have been lower class or lower middle class. I moved out of my parents' house last year, which was in the Up East, wealthiest area of town, out to an area that's basically one step up from public housing. It's the little details that add up that make things weird. For example, my mom recently passed down her car to me. It's a 2009 VW Passat, and it's a top-of-the-line car. It's a little awkward sometimes, My neighbors will come over and be like, "Oh my god, I would kill to drive a car like that." These are people in their 50s and 60s who have worked their entire life, and I'm a 23-year-old who got the car for free, simply because of my family. It bugs the crap out of me. On a similar note, I've had car troubles a few times in the last year, and whenever someone saw me struggling with my car, inevitably they would rush over and ask to help. It's incredible. There are 3 or 4 professional mechanics in my apartment complex, and there are tons of people who hang out in the parking lot and work on their cars. It just blows my mind that people are so helpful. In my parents' neighborhood, if you were messing with your car in your driveway, your neighbors would call the hauler immediately. One of my biggest pet peeves is rich kids who get a good job or an awesome career step up and act like they're hot crap because they did it completely on their own. No, even if your mom and dad didn't give you a dime, odds are they still gave you opportunities you wouldn't have without them. My dad owns a software company, and I'm really big into entrepreneurship and startups. I'm working on a small startup of my own, and it's the little things that my dad is doing to help me out that count. Like, he went over my business plan and gave me solid feedback on what was good and what wasn't. When the time comes to pitch to investors, he promised me he'd help me put together my pitch. Heck, he even offered to help me code my project, a project that he'd charge a client $35K for. I will never ever pretend I did everything all on my own, because I'd be lying through my teeth if I did. Sorry for the long ramble this turned into. I just have a lot of feelings about socioeconomic inequality. LOL. I grew up in an upper middle class family, and I once dated a guy that came from a poor Florida family. One thing I noticed was that he tried to save everything. He had underwear that was full of holes but would still not throw them out, even after I bought him a bunch more. Also, he knew very little about life outside of his home state, was never up on current world affairs, and was ignorant to so much basic knowledge. He also only knew of and ate the most basic foods, like burgers, fries, noodles, etc. I tried introducing him to different foods, sushi, even, but he'd refuse. The relationship ended up lasting less than 6 months. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.